Welcome. Talking about diabetes tonight and blood sugars and that. And so what is diabetes? There's really two kinds of diabetes. When you hear the word diabetes, there's diabetes mellitus, which has to do with blood sugar. And I'm going to go into the different kinds of diabetes mellitus, but whenever you hear diabetes, that's what most people think of as diabetes mellitus. There's also diabetes insipidus, and most people get these two, they think they're the same thing. Diabetes insipidus is basically when you create too much urine, is what happens. And it's more of a pituitary adrenal issue, and we have hormones that control that. And so these individuals will start peeing more and more and more and more until basically they become dehydrated and they start losing minerals out of themselves. So know that those are two different things, and I often hear patients get these confused when they're talking to me about what they are. So know that if you're talking about blood sugar, diabetes mellitus. These are some basic definitions. I threw these in here more so as we go along, you won't be confused about some things I'm talking about. So when we're talking about diabetes, and especially diabetes mellitus, we're talking about a chronic disease where blood sugar is high. And in particular, blood sugar, we're talking about glucose. And this starts becoming an issue when we start having insulin problems with it. So diabetes is a chronic problem with your blood sugar, and you also begin to have problems with insulin in that. Insulin is a hormone that your beta cells of your pancreas make, and basically its job is to carry blood sugar or glucose into the cell. So insulin's there, insulin takes it and passes it through the cell membrane, the inside, so your cells can use it. That's really its primary job. Insulin resistance is basically when your cell says, no more, I'm not going to open the gate and let you carry anything more in here. And so that's what insulin resistance is. There are receptor sites on the outside of cells that the insulin comes up to, plugs into, and pulls the glucose inside. In insulin resistance, those receptor sites basically shut down and close the gates and say, nope, not coming in here. Hyperglycemia is an easy one. It means high blood sugar. So I may say high glucose or high blood sugar. That means hyperglycemia. The pancreatic beta cells. These are the cells in your pancreas, and your pancreas is kind of located right here next to your stomach on the left side. It produces your insulin. The pancreas also produces some other digestive enzymes and some other things that trigger the brain to tell you whether you're hungry or not hungry and that. And so it's a pretty important thing. You can't live without your pancreas. Glucose, it is the type of sugar that your body uses as a fuel source. And down here, I said main fuel source. That's probably in the United States, that's true. In tribes and people in other countries that don't eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, they eat more meat, it's probably not glucose. It's probably actually ketones. So, but in our case, we mainly eat sugary stuff here in the United States. More basic definitions. So, mitochondrial dysfunction, I probably did a disservice when I didn't mention what mitochondria are to begin with. In my brain, it's simple and it's probably I'm missing out. Mitochondria are inside your cells. They're the little power plant inside your cells. They give your cell all the energy they need to function. They use two different fuel sources in the mitochondria. One is glucose, and the other one is ketones. Ketones are the breakdown product of fat. So these mitochondria, when they're working fine, your cells work fine. When they don't work fine, your cell is dying. It doesn't have the energy to survive, so it usually dies. And this is one of the major issues in aging, is called mitochondrial dysfunction. This was probably really starting to figure it out probably about 15 years ago. And now if you're on Facebook, you probably see Dr. Axe, you see Pompeo, you see several of the other ones. This is what all they're talking about, only thing they're talking about. It's probably not the only thing out there that's causing problems, but it's a major contributor. So mitochondrial dysfunction, when it doesn't work properly, your cells don't make ATP, which is the energy they use, and cells begin to die. ATP depletion. When your mitochondria don't work, you don't make ATP, it depletes. Your cells don't have energy. Oxidative stress. Oxidative stress basically means rust. It means you're rusting on the inside. So you get things in the mitochondria like chemicals that shouldn't be there, you get too much sugar there, you actually get true stress in your body, you produce too much steroids, and you get rusty mitochondria. So those are not things that I'm going to test you on, but they just help you understand more as we go along what I'm talking about. So we have different types of diabetes mellitus. And the first one is type 1 diabetes, and I'm going to go into each one of these, so I'm going to go through this slide pretty quickly. There's type 2 diabetes, and there's gestational diabetes. So those are really the three that we talk about when we're talking about diabetes mellitus or diabetes with blood sugar issues. So what causes type 1, or what is type 1? Type 1 is basically when you stop producing insulin. Your pancreas, your beta cells inside your pancreas just stop working. So there's no insulin in your body. And insulin, like I said, is the courier that takes glucose and takes it inside your cell. So without insulin, you basically get high blood sugar, it's floating around, and it has nowhere to go. Your cells can't get any energy inside of it, and we have issues. There's reasons for type 1. There's genetic reasons for it. There's several genes that code for those beta cells inside the pancreas. And when you have the wrong genes, you just can't code for them. So there's families out there now that have lineages now of type 1 diabetics. And back several hundred years ago, if you had that, you were dead. You just wouldn't have lived. So those lineages basically would have got shut down. Now they're starting to build up again, and we're getting actually more type 1 diabetics because people are living through it now. And those are the genes that tend to cause a problem there. There are environmental triggers. So you can be born, your insulin's working fine, your pancreas is working fine, and you get some viral infections, and basically all of a sudden, next thing you know, after the viral infection, you end up as a type 1 diabetic. This happens usually in younger people. So we're talking about little kids up into their 20s. It also happens again in older adults. So it tends to happen in little people and older people. It's not usually a mid-range issue. Then we have dietary factors. They have found, these next three are kind of interesting. They're still being studied. But individuals that are introduced to cow's milk too soon. So you take them off breast milk, put them on cow's milk, and all of a sudden they become a type 1 diabetic. Interesting enough, there's a number of people out there, and there's only about 25% of people who can really digest cow's milk properly. And a lot of them, if you throw in cow's milk too soon, and the ones that can't, they end up with type 1 diabetes. High gluten diets cause it. So in particular, gluten, when you create an antibody against gluten or an immune response against gluten, a lot of times it cross-reacts with other things in your body. Thyroid's most common, also the pancreas. So they believe a high gluten diet can cause type 1 diabetes, or pancreatitis is really what's happening there. And then the next one is low vitamin D. This one, they say there is a correlation between low vitamin D and type 1 diabetes. They haven't been able to prove it's a thing yet, and they don't know whether it's which way it's going. Does type 1 cause a low vitamin D, or is low vitamin D causing a type 1? But there's a correlation. Gut and microbe. So the gut microbiome plays a big role in signaling. It sends a lot of hormones, it sends a lot of signals to what's going on, and a lot of these bacteria will either take up a lot of sugar or they put out a lot of sugar. They may take starchy foods, break it down, and dump the sugar in, and so having the wrong bacteria in your gut can make it so that your blood sugar is either high or low, and it can cause type 1 diabetes. And then geographic factors here. I believe this truly has to do with vitamin D. So I think vitamin D is more of a problem than we know right now. So individuals that are farther from the equator, which would have less sunlight, less vitamin D, tend to have more type 1 diabetes. And then really the big thing, which I had up top, but I want to talk about other things first, the immune system, basically. It is type 1 for the most part, probably 80 to 90% of it is an autoimmune situation. You've made an antibody against the beta cells in the pancreas, and so it destroys them. You can also get other ones that go against anti-GAD or anti-insulin. These ones make it so that even though you produce the insulin, they gum it up where it doesn't work. So these are the type of things that cause type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is the most common. I will say back in the old days, this was extremely rare. Most people didn't have enough sugar in their diet to become a type 2 diabetic. Now we have kids in preschool as type 2 diabetics. So this is basically a situation where you are consuming too much sugar, fat, or you have other poisons that are causing some problems with insulin. So you're getting insulin resistance. So the main causes for this are an unhealthy diet, high in sugar and high in unhealthy fats. So when I said unhealthy fats, some of you were here for when I did seed oils. Seed oils tend to increase the likelihood of having type 2 diabetes over basically your tallow and your lard. Prediabetes. So individuals that have higher than normal blood sugar, even at a young age, you go usually to the medical doctor and like, hey, your blood sugar's a little high, no big deal, and you go on your way. That is a major cause of type 2 diabetes. Excessive weight is a major factor. So your body wants to usually take excess fat, break it down in the liver, and make it into sugar. Well, if you start getting too much fat on board, that means you have a huge storehouse of extra sugar there, because that's what that fat is. And your body still wants to kind of move it around, use it, and it's going to cause more type 2 diabetes. So usually, typically, a thin person does not get type 2 diabetes. It's rare. It can happen, but it's rare. Lack of physical activity. So when you have activity, the more activity you have, the more insulin your beta cells inside your pancreas produce. So if you're not getting activity, you're going to produce less insulin. You have less couriers to get that blood sugar out of the body and into the cells and use it up. So activity is a major one. If you have somebody who is currently a diabetic and they're sitting at home in their easy chair, the likelihood of them reversing that diabetes is going to be pretty rough. It's going to be pretty hard to do. High blood pressure increases the risk of diabetes. So the high blood pressure changes the way your body uses insulin. And I'll get into the mitochondria in that. But basically, if you have high blood pressure, you're going to have less insulin. Your blood sugar is going to go up. Abnormal cholesterol, in particular in this, low levels of what we call good cholesterol, HDL, and high triglycerides. That combination tends to cause problem in the mitochondria, which makes then type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance. Insulin resistance, we'll get into it more in a little bit, but basically whenever the cells stop the insulin from carrying the glucose into it. And then pancreatic dysfunction. So there's a lot of individuals out there now on things like proton pump inhibitors. And proton pump inhibitors tend to make your pancreas not produce as much insulin, and so therefore you're going to have problems with it. There's a number of other medications that do it. Also alcoholism does it too. Then genetic factors. You can have genes that can precipitate more type 2 or type 1 diabetes. Some of the genes I showed you on type 1 play a role in here too. Maybe instead of being all the way broken, the gene's half broken. So you go fine up until your 50s, and then now you get type 2 diabetes. So that's something there. Gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes I'll cover in a second, but basically gestational diabetes is when you're pregnant and basically you get high blood sugar while you're pregnant. It also, if you have gestational diabetes, your likelihood of getting type 2 is higher. Certain medications. So there's a lot of individuals that go and get cortisone shots in their knees, in their backs, things like that. And typically your blood sugar will rise up for anywhere from a couple days to a couple months after you get those injections. There's individuals that go and take prednisone and all of a sudden become a diabetic. They haven't been a diabetic in the past, maybe they're pre-diabetic, go take prednisone for some kind of inflammatory condition and become diabetic. The one that I have seen, which is interesting here in Cody, is a lot of the doctors prescribe metoprolol, which is a blood pressure medication. And it is known to raise blood sugars about 35 points. So if you're a pre-diabetic and they put you on metoprolol for high blood pressure or fast heart rate, next thing you know, you're a full-blown diabetic. And that's an interesting one. And there's other ones, I can get the name wrong. Cordopolol is one that basically does the same thing, but doesn't raise your blood sugar. So it's easy as changing that prescription, and you don't end up with diabetes from it. And then some of your diuretics, basically they concentrate, you pee out the fluid, and they concentrate the blood sugar so it goes up. And then there's some hormone issues. Not only just the steroids, and by the way, when I mention steroids too, that can also be steroids as in estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. They can make blood sugars go up too. PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, usually starts out in young women, and some people think that the blood sugar causes it. Some people think that the hormone changes cause it. It's probably a combination there of both. It's probably a positive feedback loop where blood sugar's up, hormones go up, and they just keep going up like this, and you end up with problems here. And then ethnicity and race, very well could say that this is genetics, but where this really plays a role at is with Inuits up in Alaska and your Polynesian individuals. most of them didn't have grains at all in their diet. They had 0 grains. So their genetics, basically, and their evolution, as you'd say, made it so that they would consume fat really well, but they didn't consume carbohydrates very well. So Inuits would live the whole year on meat and blubber and do fine. Now, we take them wheat, bread up there and everything else, and now they're diabetics because they can't process enough sugar fast enough. They don't make enough insulin for it. The same thing with Polynesians. They ate mostly fish and fresh fruit when they had fresh fruit, but they didn't eat grains. Now we're taking all kinds of grains and feeding it to them, and so they have problems. Gestational diabetes, this is when your blood sugar goes up when you're pregnant. And part of this is hormonal. The placenta increases estrogen. I just said that steroids can increase blood sugar. Well, when women are pregnant, they have all kinds of hormones going on, all kinds of steroids going on, and so they don't produce as much insulin because of that. Their need for insulin goes up because not only are you producing insulin for yourself, but you're producing it for the baby too, so you have to produce a lot more to cover both of you. Plus, your body's doing a whole bunch of changes and needs lots of energy. It needs lots of glucose, but there's not enough insulin. Pre-existing insulin resistance. So this is where the problem comes. People that are already obese or eating a poor diet or even have higher blood sugar before they become pregnant are going to have gestational diabetes. You can't already be taxing that system of insulin system and then throw a baby on top of it and not have problems. And again, genetics play a role in this. The biggest issue is if you have gestational diabetes, your likelihood of having regular diabetes is way up. So you need to make the lifestyle changes ahead of time to cover this. So if you have gestational diabetes, it's like the biggest warning flag saying, hey, you have problems you have to take care of. So what is sugar? So in the context of diabetes, sugar primarily refers to glucose. And I'm going to go into each one of these sugars here in a second, but it's a simple carbohydrate. Again, it says it's the body's main energy source. I would say that's true here in the United States, maybe not true in tribal places, or I just talked about the Inuits. They've had very little sugar in their diet. The Polynesians had very little sugar. It's when we started producing grains that really that changed over. In the United States, that's true. It's basically, I'm going to go into simple carbohydrates. Let me get to that. So what are the types of sugars? And by the way, the word sugar and carbohydrate can be interchanged. So when you look at a product label and it says, sometimes it'll say added sugar, that means sugar added to it. But it also will give you carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, I will explain here in a second, are actually a bunch of sugars linked together. So when you add those two numbers together, sometimes you're getting a lot of sugar on things. So on simple sugars, simple carbohydrates, there's really two simple. You have monosaccharides and you have disaccharides. A monosaccharide means it is one piece of sugar. That's all there is to it. So we talk about glucose. It's one molecule of sugar, and basically it's found in fruits, vegetables, and honey. That's where it's found at in nature. So that's where, if you're living off the land, that's where you get glucose from. And most of the time, if we go back to the trappers that were here, in the 1800s, they got a little fruit off the plums up there. They got a little grass. They got a few of the root tubers and things like that. But they got very little glucose. Most of it was fat, and most of it was meat that they ate. So none of them were diabetics. Fructose. Fructose is found in fruits and honey. That's really about the only place that you find fructose other than just a very few vegetables. It's interesting that there's a little bit found in corn back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, a little bit of it. Now, they basically modified corn where it's tons and tons of fructose in it. Corn is almost as bad as candy now with fructose. I'll get into fructose and how it's metabolized here in a little bit. And then galactose. This comes from dairy products and some peas too. Some of your soy, some of your other peas in there. And it's also broken down in the liver too. So neither fructose or galactose, your body doesn't use them like they are. They actually have to go in and they have to go through quite an extensive process to make them into glucose. So when you see fructose, basically you know that your body has to go and do a ton of work to change it over. And there's a lot of byproducts that happen in both those. So Some people will say, well, it's okay, I'm not getting glucose, I'm getting fructose. That's probably 5 times worse than the glucose. Again, on the simple carbohydrates, these are called disaccharides. Disaccharide means 2. Di means 2. And so these are 2 sugars stuck together. Our most common sugar, when people talk about sugar in everyday life, they're talking about sucrose. That's table sugar. And we get that from sugar cane and we get that from beets. So we produce a lot of it here in Wyoming. Sucrose is made of a glucose and a fructose. So when you take in sucrose, regular table sugar, one of them goes straight in as glucose, the other one goes to your liver. And I'll tell you more about fructose here in a moment. Lactose. Lactose is made, it's milk sugar, it's made with dairy products. And it's 1 part glucose and 1 part galactose. In America, in adults, only about 1/5 or 20% of individuals can actually truly break down lactose. There's a bond that fastens glucose and galactose together, and you just don't have the enzyme to break it down. So it's kind of interesting to see how many people really have a problem with that. And a lot of people can do it when they're young. Once they get to 3 to 5, they stop being able to do it, and that's found in dairy. Maltose. Maltose is an interesting one. It's found in sprouted grains. It's also found when they ferment grains. So when they take a lot of times and process grains in the plant, they've actually put in yeast and things in it, and it starts to break the grain down, and you end up with maltose, which is glucose, 2 glucose molecules. So anything that has maltose in it, it's really going to rev up your glucose levels in your body. And that's your, like I said, that's your fermented grains or anything that's had yeast added to it, so your baked goods.
How about sourdough?
Yeah, definitely. 1,000%. Sourdough, if a lot of people are eating sourdough now because they hear how healthy it is for you and everything, sourdough is not the savior by far, by any case. And I'll get to bread at the very end, and I'll talk more about that. But sourdough definitely has a lot of sugar in it. If you're diabetic, sourdough, you should probably run from it. Complex carbs. So we just went from simple carbs, the monosaccharides, the disaccharides. Now we're going to complex carbs. There's 2 classes of complex carbs. There's starches, which are ones that break down into sugar, and there's fibers that don't break down into sugar, at least not easily. So starches are your complex carb that comes from potatoes, your grains like rice and bread and pasta and corn. These are all things that are basically long chains of carbohydrates. When they get into your gut, there are enzymes, amylase enzymes that come from your pancreas, a little bit from the liver, and they start to break it down. And then there's bacteria that come in and break them down. So instead of having a long chain, it starts breaking it down into those disaccharides and those monosaccharides. So it takes it from being unusable to basically sugar that goes into glucose. This is probably where most people that are diabetics are struggling with. They're actually getting too much grains and potatoes and that kind of stuff in their diet. And we are really heavy that way now when we didn't used to be. It's quite interesting. Even in other countries, the first time I went to China, I always thought you go to a Chinese restaurant here and you get a big helping of rice and you get stuff on top of it. Well, when you go to China, it's changing by the way, but when you used to go to China, they would give you a little cup of rice, and I would say that cup was probably about half a cup of rice is what you would get. And then you got a lot of vegetables, you got a little meat. And that's the way their diets were, and everybody there was super thin. The last time I was in China, it had changed. You got less meat, less vegetables, and more rice, and people were starting to get heavier. So it definitely plays a big role in here. In Europe, it's kind of the same way too. More meat, more vegetables, and the bread is usually a fresh piece of bread, and they cut you off a piece of bread. So it's a little different, and usually it's whole grain, so it has more fiber in it. So the biggest issue with these starches is that they break down rather fast in your gut. So they make blood sugar go boom, way high real quick and tends to stay there. Fiber is actually the place where most people here in the United States are not getting enough fiber. We have a lot of digestive issues, and fiber is probably the biggest reason we have that is because they're getting starches and not fibers. Fibers do several things. Your body, whenever it goes to squeeze poop through, it actually grabs a hold of those fibers and pulls them through. So you not only are pushing stuff through your gut, you're pulling it through. And if you have longer fibers, it all sticks together and it can pull it through and push at the same time. Without fibers, you start having constipation, you start having issues like that. Or some people are just the opposite. They don't have enough fiber and everything runs through them because it's liquid. So fiber is important for digestion in that way, but also good healthy bacteria have to have fiber to live. They come in, they ferment the fibers, they eat the sugar that they get out of it themselves, so it doesn't go out in your system. They eat it themselves, and they produce a whole bunch of good chemicals, a whole bunch of good enzymes that help you process other things and help you make insulin. So these fibers are good for you. So this is something that people ask me all the time. Well, if fructose is not glucose, how does it make you have diabetes? Fructose basically has to go to the liver, and when it goes to the liver, it basically is made into fat. And when it's made into fat, then your liver has really two choices, because that fat in the liver is either going to stay there or it's going to turn it back into sugar. So individuals that have fat, non-alcoholic fatty liver, it's usually because of fructose. And if you go back and ask them, usually they're candy eaters, they're corn eaters, or they're soda drinkers. And a lot of fructose in soda. Galactose is also converted in the liver too. I'll get into both of those a little more. Sucrose, your table sugar, it goes in as two parts. One part glucose, one part fructose. So part of it you use right away. The other part you're storing in the liver. And so if you get too much of that, you're going to get fatty liver also. Lactose, basically, we go in with glucose, we go in with lactose. Lactose is going to have to go to the liver to be processed. Maltose, it goes in, you melt it right in your mouth and it goes into 2 parts glucose. So it's going to make a difference there too. And your complex carbs. Your complex carbs, they go in, your body produces amylase enzymes to basically take this long chain of maybe 300 pieces of glucose and just chops it up and it goes right in. So your complex carbs that are starches will cause your blood sugar to go up, and that's the biggest detriment to us. So again, in essence, all carbohydrates, every carbohydrate you put in your body other than fiber is going to become glucose or fat in your body. There's no other choice. It's going to happen. Chronically high consumption of these, especially refined sugars and starches. So that means that we've taken, basically, let's say a piece of wheat, we ran it through, we bleached it, we broke it down, we made it into a piece of white bread. There's nothing left for your body to work on. It's going to go straight in and become sugar. And so eating highly refined sugars and starches are going to overwhelm the body's ability to regulate it, leading to insulin resistance and eventually type 2 diabetes. So I said I'd go into fructose in particular. But fructose, which most of our fructose in the United States is made now with modified corn. So back in the 60s and 70s, if we could transport back and you eat a piece of corn, it'd be a little sweet, but not very sweet. If you now come forward to now and you go to eat a piece of corn, it is much, 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 much sweeter than the corn was then, because we have modified it to have high fructose corn syrup in it. Because if you don't sell your corn at the supermarket, you can sell it basically to the refinery, and they're going to take it down. They're going to take high fructose out of it. They're going to make candy out of it. They're going to put it in all your syrups. They're going to put it, because if you go get maple syrup, the fake stuff, not the real stuff, it's high fructose corn syrup. It's even in almost every one of your beef sticks. If you go get a beef stick from the gas station or wherever, it has a ton of high fructose corn syrup in it. All of your sodas have high fructose corn syrup in it. So it goes in, it goes to your hepatic portal vein, it goes to your liver, and your liver begins to make F1P. F1P is basically a precursor to fat. So it makes that, and your liver actually has to work really, really, really hard to make F1P out of fructose. Some people don't have the enzyme to do this. It's usually of French descent, and so those people are fructose intolerant. And they can't handle fruit, they can't handle a lot of things that we can handle in general. And I've only had maybe 3 patients that don't have that enzyme. So it goes in, it makes a bunch of F1P, which begins to cause you liver problems. Then your liver is going to turn all of that over to fat. Now, if you're on a calorie deficit, it can real quickly turn that fat back into glucose, and it uses it up and get rid of it. If you're in a calorie excess, which most of us are, basically it goes in the liver, and it becomes more of a stationary fat, and it begins to stay there, and you end up with fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. One of the things when we look at cholesterol levels they have on there a lot of times is triglycerides. And they have you doing a fasting, and usually that fast should be about 9 to 11 hours to do that cholesterol. But if you come back and your triglycerides are high, I would tell you, go back and look at your diet and see how much fructose you're getting in your diet, especially high fructose corn syrups and that kind of stuff, because usually that's a telltale sign that you're having that issue. Also, those triglycerides are also an indicator. When we saw earlier about cholesterol and that, and it said HDL low, triglycerides high, those triglycerides are an indicator that you are getting too much sugar well before your blood sugar starts showing it. So that's why we're concerned about those. They cause oxidative stress. So I said oxidative stress is rust. I'll talk more about that when I get to the mitochondria dysfunction. But basically, you start to rust inside because your body can't break it down. It starts making accumulation there. You get mitochondrial dysfunction, ATP depletes, and then you get insulin resistance. So high fructose corn syrup, you want to watch it. So one of the things that was really came up with, I think it was in the 1930s, 1920s, was called a glycemic index. And so they were trying to figure out a good way to measure how much sugar or how fast sugar affected you. And so they came up with the glycemic index. And the glycemic index is based on glucose being at 100. And most of your bread, by the way, white bread breaks down straight to glucose really quick. So they said, glucose, white bread, we're just going to put it at the top of the chart. And anything that is a 70 on this chart or above is a diabetic causer. Basically, it goes in, creates your blood sugar to go up, and these are issues and problems that you have. I'll show you a chart here in a while, but examples are white bread, white rice, potatoes, sugary drinks. They have a score above 70. And when you're eating a lot of things in that score above 70, those should be once in a while things. They shouldn't be all the time things. Medium glycemic index foods are basically that 56 to 70 in that range. And these are things that take longer to turn into sugar. And so you got things like whole wheat bread, brown rice, some of your fruits, things like that fall in this thing. And then low glycemic index are things that are 55 or less. And for the most part, you can eat almost as much of this as you want to, and you're not going to be a diabetic. So the more of these you eat, the more likely you are to be a diabetic. The more of these you eat, the less likely you are to be a diabetic. And if you think about it from a caveman standpoint, or like I always like to go back to the trappers, if they had anything, they were probably more in here, and there was nothing in here that they really got. So this is a modern food issue when we look at it. So this is the glycemic index. This is the best one I could find for what I wanted to show. Unfortunately, it's backwards. I always like glucose to be at the top. I like 100 to be at the top. You go the other way. But as you can see, if we come here at 55, 55 is kind of like I say this is kind of cut off and go the other way. You can start to see how high you go here, and this is kind of how bad things are for you, getting better and better and better and better and better and better as you go on that glycemic index. There's a lot of them that are much better and much bigger charts. I couldn't fit it on this slide. So, and all you got to do is Google glycemic index. What's that? Yeah. So interesting enough, I think it's in one of these slides. I took out a bunch of slides because I have to narrow it down to get to it. But pizza sauce has an absolute ton of sugar in it. So a lot of times, back up on that story, when I was going through and I had classes with med students when I was getting my medical technology degree, we had 1 week of dietetics. They came in and they put up the food pyramid on the first day, and they spent the week going through it. The very last statement in the class is still the one I remember this day. She threw up a piece of pizza and a Diet Coke over the food pyramid. So over the glass of milk that's on the food pyramid and over the thing, she put up a piece of pizza and Diet Coke. She says, if you get this, you get everything you need in your day. That was her saying. She was dead serious. So, and that's what we were all taught, and that's what doctors are taught. Pizza is almost about as sugary a thing as you can get. The bread is processed in it. You put sauce on it that is full of sugar. Then you turn around and put lactose in the dairy. A lot of the sausages and things they put on it actually have high fructose corn syrup in it. So a pizza is really pretty much a piece of candy, and it's going to make your blood sugar go up, you know? And we never think of it. We don't think of it as being a piece of candy. Yeah.
How come it's 30 on the GI scale?
It should be higher. It's wrong, you know? So they're thinking of it being a whole grain pizza with tomato sauce on it. But this is probably an older chart that's on there, because modern pizza is candy.
Will sugar be labeled in the ingredients in that tomato sauce?
It usually is. Yeah, it usually is. But it may not be labeled as sugar. It may be labeled as high fructose corn syrup. Yeah. It may be labeled as carbohydrates. So it could have other names on it. It could even have maltose on it, things like that. So a lot of times they're not labeling it truly as sugar. They're covering up with another name. Yeah.
Why is watermelon so high?
Watermelon's mostly sugar. Fact is, if you dry watermelon out, you can actually make sugar out of it like you do sugar beets. So you can make a pretty high concentration of fructose out of it. Yeah. Watermelons are real high, and then your cantaloupes and your other muskmelons are really close to it. But watermelon, if you're ever trapped somewhere and you need sugar, dry out watermelon. It'll make sugar for you. That's also why watermelon's sticky. If you get it on the counter or you get it somewhere, it's actually sugar that's the sticky part of it. So now, if glucose is so bad for us, why do we need it? Why it's important? First of all, it's one of the primary sources for our body's main fuel. Our body has to have some glucose. Either we have to make it out of fats, we have to make it out of proteins, we have to make it, we have to have it. Our brain, interesting enough, likes to function off of glucose. But our brain likes to function off of it at a certain level. If it gets too low, we get goofy and can't think correctly. So everybody's probably had hypoglycemia at one time where you also just can't think right now, I gotta get some food. It's because you went below that threshold. But the same thing happens if you take sugar and go above that threshold too. You gum up the works and your brain doesn't work right. So there's a fine, narrow way where the brain works in there. Glucose also is a precursor to energy storage. So whenever it goes into our body, glucose becomes fat. Without glucose, we wouldn't be able to put on enough fat on our bodies and we wouldn't make it through. So most of the time, even when you eat fat, it doesn't go in and get stored as fat. A lot of times it goes in, the liver turns it over to glucose and turns it back to fat again. So there's some work that goes on with it. That's also why people that tend to eat fat tend to lose weight, is because they put in 100 calories. It goes to the liver, it takes 20, 30 calories to turn it into glucose, and then it's turned back again, taking another 20, 30 calories, so you have a net of like 20 calories. So it's kind of an interesting process in there. The one place in your body that you have to have glucose is in your red blood cells. Red blood cells can't operate off ketones, which is the energy that you get from fats and protein. It has to have glucose. The problem is, again, it has a very narrow level of glucose that works. So if glucose goes too high, the receptor sites that pull in insulin, they shut off on the red blood cell. So you stop carrying oxygen to the rest of your body if the blood sugar goes too high. But if blood sugar goes too low, you can't carry oxygen. So blood sugar at the right level, and usually that's like 72 to 95 to 100, somewhere in that ballpark, is the right level for your blood in there. Importance of glucose, essential for life, mainly because of the red blood cells in there. It basically powers all your body's functions in one way or another. It maintains body temperature. So individuals that tend to get too much glucose, at first their body temperature will go up, and then it comes back and it signals, and their body temperature will start dropping over time. So you'll see people when they first start gaining too much weight, they start becoming diabetic, they'll be hot all the time, fanning themselves. Next thing you know, they're real heavy and they're freezing to death. So blood sugars maintain body temperature. Supports growth and repair. So little kids need a lot more sugar and a lot more calories than adults do. The more you're active, the more you have to rebuild stuff, the more you need to repair in there. That's also why, ever so often, not all the time, but I get patients in that are not eating well or they're not absorbing their food well, and all of a sudden they're not repairing and they're having problems. I may actually tell them to go eat more sugar, get more calories in to actually help repair stuff. You'll see in accidents, people have auto accidents and things like that. Often they will have a spike in blood sugars. It goes up. Their body's intentionally trying to pull the blood sugar out of the fats so that they can do repair. And so it's actually a repair mechanism, and you should see it go up some. It shouldn't stay there. It should go up. And then regulation of hormones. Insulin and glucagon are the two most important, but it also changes all of your other hormones like estrogen. We just talked about PCOS. It causes estrogen to go up, and so sugars going up or down too low will cause problems with hormones. So now, that was glucose and sugar. So why is insulin important? Again, insulin, you have to have it to supply energy to the cells. It's the courier, the farrier that takes basically the blood sugar, the glucose from the body and puts it into the cells. It maintains homeostasis, which means it manages maintains the balance of hormones in your body. And then it prevents you from having too high a blood sugar or really too low a blood sugar. And if you get too high a blood sugar, basically you start having things like heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, nerve damage, eye damage, foot problems. This is really kind of the cascade that starts. And if you're a diabetic, your quality of life really is going to decline fast somewhere along the way. It's kind of like there's this edge you can go on, and once you start sliding down that edge, you go really fast. And so, and you can kind of see these are the things that happen as you go. So why is insulin important? It lowers our blood sugar. It basically facilitates glucose uptake. So what that means is it helps glucose go into the body again. It promotes the storage of sugars as fats. It inhibits glucose production. So if insulin goes up, it tells your liver, stop turning fructose into fat and glucose. Just kind of hold on to it. So insulin can actually cause you to have more fatty liver if you're taking in too much sugar. But at that point, it's doing its job. Nowhere in our evolution or our bodies were we ever meant to have too much sugar. It just didn't exist. We shouldn't have had it. And so we falsely started putting these sugars into us. One of the big ones down here, it aids in protein synthesis. So everything in your body is made of a piece of protein. All your muscles, your brain, everything has to have proteins to do that. And you have to have insulin to make that happen, to make the amino acids stick together in that. And then it influences electrolyte balance. So individuals that are diabetic and become insulin resistant tend to have problems managing their fluid balance and electrolytes. So they get dehydrated easier. They have more cramping. They have more situations like that. And one of the big ones is potassium. They tend to have potassium issues when you become a diabetic. So what is insulin resistance? So when we talk about insulin resistance, I think I'll show later on the cascade, but usually the way it works is you get increased blood sugar, which is your prediabetes. And no problem. The doctor, oh, no problem, no problem. But when you start getting towards diabetes, you begin to get what's called insulin resistance. And this is where the cell literally puts up that wall and says, you know what? You can't give me any more sugar. I can't handle it anymore. And so basically your cell becomes resistant to the insulin is what it is. And so it impairs the ability of the cell to take it in with the impaired glucose uptake. Your blood sugar begins to go higher. And then your pancreas will say, hey, we must not have enough insulin. If I can't get this into the cells, I must not be producing enough insulin. So then your pancreas starts making more insulin. And you actually can wear out your pancreas where it just stops. But at this point, when your pancreas starts making more insulin, it actually creates a situation where you become more insulin resistant. So that sugar in there triggers you to be insulin resistant. Your pancreas says, I need more insulin. And now you're even more insulin resistant. You just started down the pathway. It's kind of like a snowball going downhill. So, I explained, I thought I took out this slide, so I apologize. So, excess consumption of calories. This can be sugar or fat. Basically, along with inactivity. So that inactivity is important in there. If you're not having enough activity to burn calories as you're putting them in, and you kick in too many calories, you basically get lipid overload, and so that means you get too much fat on board, usually, especially in the liver. You start getting chronic inflammation. So things start to not be able to work properly. Your body's trying to, before it tried to do everything with enzymes, and enzymes are chemicals that basically have a process and they work that way. Once your body gets overloaded and it can't clean up using enzymes to clean up, it then starts making antibodies. It starts making immune responses to clean up. But immune responses kind of beget immune responses. So if you have a little inflammation and you keep pouring more sugar in and that, it puts more immune response. And so it just builds and builds. And so that's kind of snowball going downhill again. Oxidative stress. And I'll cover this again later, but if you get too much insulin in there and it's trying to put signals in and tell your body to speed up and do more with what it has, you begin to get rust in those mitochondria inside the cells. And the rust begins this whole cascade in a minute. You also, when you have genetic dispositions in here, that means genes that say, hey, you lean towards insulin resistance. When the insulin gets to a certain threshold, it turns on the gene. So most of your genes in your body really have on and off switches. That's why otherwise individuals have like the BRCA gene that's for cancer, breast cancer. You weren't born with cancer. You didn't have it in your teens. You didn't have it in your 20s. Something takes that switch and flips it on. And so in this case here, you may have the gene for insulin resistance, but don't have it, until all of a sudden your pancreas starts producing a lot of insulin, and it goes, click, flips on the switch. Now it's very hard to reverse that. You actually have to work extremely hard. It's reversible, but it's very hard. On hormone imbalances, we've covered this too. The polyovarian syndrome is what I was trying to say a while ago. These are situations where hormones have become out of balance. And whenever you have hormones that are speeding up processes in your body tries to make enough insulin to aid in that process. But as soon as the insulin gets too high, your body shuts it down. And that's what happens in these hormone conditions like that. And then mitochondrial dysfunction. I'll get more into that in a little bit. Now, how about now? So, in your cells, this is kind of just your average, everyday animal cell is what it is. And these little things here are your mitochondria. And mitochondria are your powerhouse of your cell. So every action that goes on in your cell dividing, your cell bringing in waste, getting rid of waste and everything, has to have energy. The energy that your mitochondria makes is called ATP. And ATP basically is made from two different things in your body. It's either made from glucose or it's made from ketones. And like I said, ketones come from fats and from proteins. Glucose comes from carbohydrates. That's the places that you get energy. The mitochondria are just like a power plant. So if we have a power plant down here by Douglas and that, if you have a power plant that burns coal produces a nice good heat. But there's a problem with coal. Coal has a bunch of waste to it. Not only does smoke come out of the chimney, but you have a lot of suet and everything there. You can burn natural gas, and natural gas comes out hot, nice fire, but it comes out pretty clean. There's not as much waste and not as much suet there. Your mitochondria like to burn ketones. That's actually what they prefer to burn, and they like to burn ketones because there's very little waste with it. So that's their favorite. But they will burn sugar or glucose if it's available over ketones. Because sugar goes really fast, and if you leave sugar in the cell, if you leave it floating around here, it starts to cause a whole bunch of issues inside the cell. A bunch of signaling issues, a bunch of hormone issues, and it'll cause insulin resistance where the cell can't pull anymore. So the cell wants to live. So if you put sugar into that cell, the mitochondria will take and burn it first. Well, the problem is when you burn that sugar first in that mitochondria, you get a ton of waste. A ton of waste. And that waste is called oxidative stress or rust, or called ROS. And so at first, your cell does its best to crank out all that waste and all that. But if you keep throwing sugar in there after a while, that mitochondria gets gummed up on the inside. It actually rusts up. We talked about this in the cardiovascular talk. We talked about a little bit in the cholesterol thing. That's one of the main reasons why we have so much heart disease now, is because we're clogging this up with sugar. And so people don't pay attention to that. Probably 90+% of our cardiovascular issues out there are because we're overloading that mitochondria with sugar. So you can directly see sugar consumption go up, cardiovascular issues go up. That's what happens. So normally, ketones come in, it burns them up clean, no problem. And whenever we put in sugars, we get problems there. It also causes a whole bunch of issues with nitric oxide, oxygen, that kind of stuff. But when that is burning too much sugar, we get mitochondrial dysfunction. So how does insulin resistance cause mitochondrial dysfunction? Mitochondrial dysfunction, basically when it's impaired, it's because insulin resistance has now shut down everything on the outside, and now no sugar comes in, and we can't even get ketones to it, because that same insulin opens up the gates, lets ketones come through, and glucose come through. It also regulates the hormones. So as soon as we start getting insulin resistance, the cell says, okay, I can't get anything in here at all now. I'm backed up. You shut down the gates. Nothing's coming in. And so now our mitochondria start to die off. When the powerhouse, that cell dies off, we start having other issues. We start burning more fats that are not necessarily ketones. They're actually some other intermediary things. So since we don't have ketones in there, it'll say, okay, let's try to burn a triglyceride. Well, that's even worse than the sugar. Now we have even more waste in there, and it's trying to survive and can't do it. So we start getting reduced ATP production, and now our cells depleting and running out of energy. We start creating a bunch of these reactive oxygen species. So this is rust that is a really bad rust. We can't get rid of this. This is toxic rust at this point. So now our cell's not producing energy. Our mitochondria is trying to burn things inside the cell that it's not supposed to, and we're causing toxic rust inside there. At this point, our mitochondria just starts slowing down. The function starts slowing down. And so in a cell, you can have anywhere from one mitochondria. In a muscle cell, you may have hundreds of them. And so in that muscle cell, at first, you start killing off the mitochondria and the muscle's still working, but you get tired now when you go outside and you go to the mailbox, you can't hardly make it back to the house. You sit down and you sit there for the rest of the day, and tomorrow you go back out the mailbox again. That's kind of this mitochondrial function. This is what happens when, once you're a diabetic and you go over the edge, and you see it happen. You'll be a diabetic, yeah, maybe you're still gardening, maybe you're still doing stuff, and then all of a sudden something happens and you just go boom, fall over the edge. You see this in a lot of people in like February, March, April, May. And so it's also when a lot of people die. And you think, well, you know, it's that time of year when people didn't get out well. What happened is they went and ate all the goods. They went to every Christmas party, Thanksgiving, Christmas holiday parties, Christmas. Now the A1C is up to 12, 13. Now they get out to January, February, March, and they start producing ROS. Now they're not getting out of the house. They're getting sick. They're getting, and all of a sudden they just go down and that grassy slope just falls off the mountain. So that's what's happening here. So that was how insulin resistance basically caused mitochondrial dysfunction. Now we're going the opposite way. Mitochondrial dysfunction causes insulin resistance. This is a bidirectional situation. So once you start producing ROS species in there, the body can't clean it out. It can't clean out the rust and everything. So it sends a signal and says, hey, shut down the gates. Don't bring me anything else in here. I can't take it anymore. So mitochondrial dysfunction causes insulin resistance. Now, how does hyperglycemia, which is high blood sugar, cause mitochondrial dysfunction? So whenever we talked about glucose going in, glucose is not the preferred fuel all the time for that mitochondria. When you start throwing in too much glucose, it burns it up, it produces a lot of waste, and basically impairs the whole dynamic in there, what's supposed to go on. Let me explain about diet and timing now. So back probably, this would have been about 12 years ago, there became this big rage about just eating a little bit of food all the time because you keep your metabolism up. That's good, but it's not all the time. You need to have about at least a 2-hour period in there of when you're not throwing in things. And if you do throw in something, it has to be thermodynamic, so use it up. So the people that are grazing all the time, popping in, especially if they're popping in candy and stuff like that, they never get the chance for mitochondria to use ketones. They're 100% of the time using sugars. So if you can get the body a chance to use ketones for a while, and then it has some sugar, and then goes back to ketones for a while, and then has some sugar, you're good. And that's why having a regular meal schedule pays off, because you don't go in and graze all the time. And so people that tend to be grazers, especially with foods that are not friendly to the sugars, you tend to go diabetic, even though maybe you're not eating a lot. You just never get a chance for the mitochondria to clean out here. So the process of it changing over to sugars all the time and modifying the sugars and making them rust, it's called O-gluconacylation. And so O-gluconacylation, that's actually how it's pronounced. That's the process of when it takes those sugars and it's making them into the ROS species. And it takes a lot of energy to do that. And so it starts going down these other pathways, the PKC, the AGEs, and those are basically pathways that all end up into rust. Your body doesn't like to do it, but it has to do something with the sugar, because if it doesn't clean the sugar out of the cell, the cell actually pulls in water and can burst, or the cell just dies because it's over sugar or over stimulated, really. So all this basically leads to mitochondria dying. So now, high blood sugar leads to insulin. So here in a second, and I'm not going to go through this because it's basically the same thing you repeated again, but this is really what this looks like. High blood sugar leads to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance leads to mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondrial dysfunction can go to insulin resistance or to hyperglycemia. So this is kind of a vicious cycle in here. Now the catch is, it's a triad. And so all these, if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, you're going to have an energy crisis. If you have insulin resistance, you're going to have an energy crisis. If you have too much sugar, you're going to have an energy crisis. Glucose builds up in there, you get worsening resistance. So glucose builds up, now it shuts down more of the insulin problem, or shuts down more insulin in there. Basically, you get more oxidative stress, which is rust. Then your body tries to clean it up using an immune response. It comes in and says, hey, we got all this stuff running around, let's clean up immune response. Well, immune responses tend to be cascades and tend to keep going and going and going. I've done talks before where I talk about or inflammation. And inflammation has two kinds of inflammation in your body. There's an acute inflammation and there's chronic inflammation. Acute inflammation is when you crush your hand and it turns red, it swells and all that. It should be less than 8 weeks and really right around 4 to 6 weeks, and that heals up and it stops and goes on its way. If you crush your hand and it's still hurting after 8 weeks, that's chronic inflammation, and that's what they call an aberrant reaction. It means it started the process and it doesn't know how to shut it off. So oxidative stress, when you first have it, maybe you went out and had Christmas or you went out and partied it up and you said, okay, I'm cleaning up for New Year's Eve and I'm done, and so that inflammation goes away, you're fine. Most people don't do that. They usually have Christmas, Thanksgiving, everything, they start that process and they start getting chronic inflammation, and now that cycle starts. You start getting cell damage, you get metabolic disarray. So that basically means your body doesn't know what to do with stuff. So you start getting fluid built up in places, you start getting weight gain in places, your vision isn't working, you start having all these symptoms building up, and it's kind of that snowball going downhill. And then you have all the risk of complications. So the heart disease, the kidney disease, the nerve damage, all those things come on because of that cascade in this triad. So, a lifestyle, so this is really a summary of what I said causes diabetes. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. A lifestyle characterized by excess calorie intake, so taking too much calories, but in particular, energy-dense foods. So that means energy that has a lot of calories to it. So this is going to be your baked goods, this is going to be your dairy goods, things like that that have a ton of energy, and then nutrient-poor foods. This is basically means processed foods. So if you go to eat a carrot, that is a low energy but high nutrient food. It's not a poor nutrient food because it has a lot of vitamins in it and things. But now, you go and eat a piece of white bread, you basically have high energy in it, not very good nutrients in it, and it's very dense. So you're going to gain a lot of calories out of it. But the trick is here, when I was an athlete, I trained almost 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. I would eat over 10,000 calories a day, and I would still lose weight. I couldn't put on enough weight because I had to have the calories in because of my activity levels. The problem comes when you're putting in these dense calorie foods, low nutrition. Let's take ice cream or popcorn. Those are the two most common that I hear here in Cody. That people will have dinner, they'll go sit down and watch TV, and then later on in the evening time, some people have both. They have ice cream and popcorn. Both those are very energy dense, extremely energy dense. In fact, there's more calories in that than probably most people get in their regular meal. And they're putting it in, very poor nutrition in there, and guess what they're doing? They're sitting down just watching TV when they do it. So that's like a diabetic cause happening right there. In fact, many of my diabetics have that scenario right there. But those are the primary underlying factors contributing to the development of mitochondrial dysfunction, insulin resistance, and hyperglycemia. And I probably should have put those in opposite order. It leads to high blood sugar, leads to insulin resistance, leads to mitochondrial dysfunction. But in that one picture where I had the circle, it doesn't matter which way it happens. It happens. So how do you not get type 2 diabetes? Well, live a lifestyle characterized by moderate and balanced calorie intake. So most of the time, you shouldn't be gaining weight. You should be staying steady on weight. If weight gains, we usually got to change some things. If you're overweight, we need to be losing the weight. We got to make changes to do that. And then you want regular activity. And maybe you can't go out and run anymore, but getting in steps, getting in activity, doing things that are active makes a big difference. That's how you not get diabetes. I skipped over, I took out probably about 30 slides or so out there that I wanted to have in there because I want to get to medications, I want to get to diet and that. Main thing with medications, I say this probably in every lecture when we talk about cholesterol medication, heart medication, things like that. If you need medications, you need medications. But in general, if you make lifestyle changes, most of the time you don't need medications. And if you're on medications, we can get you off. If you're not willing to make lifestyle changes, you don't have much choice. You're going to have to go on medications. The problem is, every medication, everything you put in, has other side effects to it. So, talking about medications for diabetes in particular, the most common one and the first line of defense they put people on is called metformin. And metformin basically improves insulin sensitivity. So that sounds really good. It says, hey, we're going to take care of insulin sensitivity, so we're going to open the cell up and let stuff come into the cell. The problem is, if you're a diabetic and you have high blood sugar, and you start opening up the cell and saying, okay, I'm going to make you take this sugar, well, we just talked about what happens inside the cell. If you get too much sugar in there, the cell can actually rupture and burst, or the mitochondria in there try to burn it up as fast as it can. And you're going to start a rust process inside there. You're going to start making those species. And now, maybe you're taking care of the insulin resistant with metformin, but if you're not taking care of the over amount of sugar you're putting in, now you just killed the mitochondria. Once you kill the mitochondria, then insulin resistance is going to happen even more, and you're going to have hyperglycemia. So just taking metformin by itself and not making a lifestyle change is a bad way to go, because you're actually covering up the symptom until now it becomes a nightmare. So metformin is not necessarily the good way to go. It's a good way to, maybe your blood sugar's up here and you need to bring it down. It'll help you bring it down. But if you don't cut that sugar, now you're going to need another medication. And this is how it usually happens. So doctors never tell you this, that you have to change this. No, we got you on metformin, you'll be fine. You know, nope, you got to do something about it. Same thing here. Really, I think the next one here basically stimulates your pancreas to make more insulin. So now we can make a lot more insulin, but what happens to your cell? Your cell says, I can't handle any more sugar inside, let's become insulin resistant. So that's a good medication for somebody who maybe has had a situation, maybe they've had a virus or something, and the pancreas says, hey, I just need a break, I'm not going to do it. You can come in and say, okay, pick it up a little bit, and it's not a problem. That's not how it's being used. It's being used for people when they come in and measure and say, hey, your blood sugar's here, but your insulin's here. That's usually the person that could probably make a dietary change real quick and fix it. But instead they say, well, your blood sugar's here, your insulin's here. Let's just crank up your insulin. Well, now you crank up your insulin. Now your cell's going to say, I can't take anymore, and it shuts down. So that's the problem here. The next 2, 3 here basically have to do with making your body not produce as much, or not secrete as much insulin. So these here basically make your body say, okay, you're insulin resistant, so let's not make you produce as much insulin. Well, the problem is, a lot of times your glucose goes up, or what it'll do is it makes the insulin produce more fat. So it says, let's take the sugar out. We're not going to open up the cells and put it in the cells, but we're going to take it and put it into fat. So you'll see people gain weight. Some of them, like it's actually going to be on the other one. All these have to do with that. All these here are going to make you actually take the sugar and turn it into fat, is what they do. So it's great. Your blood sugar goes down, but now you're obese and you have other issues.
What about the Ozempic?
That's where we're going to get to it here.
Okay.
We're going to get to it here really quickly. So then the next one down, the SGLT2 inhibitors, they make you pee out your glucose, which sounds like a great thing. You pee out your glucose, and now you don't have it in your body. I can go eat all the sugar I want to. The problem that happens with this is there's a lot of critters that like to eat glucose, and mainly being yeast and bacteria. So in women, you tend to have a lot of urinary tract infections with this, tend to get a lot of yeast infections, that kind of stuff. And it's usually so low grade with this you don't notice it, but over time it's causing a lot of problems. With guys on this, they tend to have problems in their prostate. So they go to the doctor and they're like, hey, your prostate numbers are going up and everything, and so you have this. And so then now they put you on other medications to actually make you pee more. And so now you're peeing out sugar and you're peeing more, so we have a double whammy there that's a problem. The next one is basically your Ozempic, your semaglutide, and that. And I'm going to go ahead and throw in tirzepatide with this. These are GLP-1 receptor inhibitors or antagonists. And so what they are really working on is they are telling your body that you're no longer hungry and you don't want to have sugar and stuff like that. They also slow down the stomach and the digestive tract so that it takes longer for your body to pull the sugar out of it. And at first that sounds like a really good thing, but this plays a big role in also mental health. So when you're on these, you can't produce a lot of the serotonin, the endorphins, and things like that you had before. Or in some individuals, it actually goes the other way, makes you produce too many. So now you're going to be on it for a while. Maybe it didn't hurt anything, but you decide to come off. Now, next thing you know, you're going to have to be on an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety medication because you came off of it. My worst fear, and the thing I've seen the worst about this, is gastroparesis. And that basically means slowing down or stopping of the digestive tract, especially the stomach. So there are studies out there that were done before it started giving to everybody that said 1 out of 100 people will end up with a paralyzed stomach from these. And so the catch is you have about 4 years to live once your stomach stops. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. A lot of individuals will notice this early on and stop doing it, and their stomach starts back up and starts working. But there are a number of people out there that they have this problem. They go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, I don't know why you're having a problem going to the bathroom. I don't know why you're having a problem throwing up. Well, your stomach isn't working. You're on this. They should know that, but a lot of doctors are missing it. So it's a real thing. And I've had several patients come in with that. So know that this is not necessarily the way to go. It does promote weight loss, but it's stopping that whole system. It's actually stopping the insulin. It's stopping the mitochondria and shutting it down. And you're going to have problems in the end. It's not sustainable, basically, is what I'm saying. And there's mental health issues on top of it. Insulin. So my father, how he's not a diabetic, I don't know, other than he's super, super, super active. But he gets white bread, puts jelly on it that he made himself with just sugar and whatever fruit he did, and he has to have that at breakfast, and he has to have it at supper. And his answer to me is, well, when I become a diabetic, not if, when I become a diabetic, I'm just going to take insulin, then I can eat more sugar. Well, we just figured out if you have too high of insulin, you basically are going to become insulin resistant and you're going to have mitochondrial issues. So that's not an answer either. Where insulin becomes important is with individuals that have type 1 diabetes. They don't produce insulin. If you don't have insulin and you can't put sugar in the cell, you die. So a type 1 diabetic needs insulin. And insulin, where another place this becomes important, is somebody who's had a horrible accident. So you've been in a car accident, you're in a coma, you're laying in the hospital, and your body's trying to repair and it's having higher blood sugar. It starts to get too high. You may have to put that person on insulin for a while to get them through that trauma and that type of thing. But in general, to throw insulin at somebody who is not a type 1 diabetic is really a bad way to go, because basically you're saying, yeah, your blood sugar is too high, let's lower it. We're going to crank it into your fat cells, we're going to crank it into your cells, and after a while it's going to stop and you're going to have dysfunction over time with that. So, medications are needed, especially they should be needed temporarily to get you back in control. It shouldn't be a lifestyle and a change. Doctors in general, I hear this all the time, patients come in and they're going to be on, usually it starts out with metformin, and then they go to one of the others, and then they start peeing it out, and so a lot of times they're on 2, 3, 4, 5 diabetic medications. And one of the things I hear all the time is, well, I'm not a diabetic anymore. And you look at their A1C, you look at this, their blood sugars are still high. I'm like, how are you not a diabetic? Everything here says you're a diabetic. Oh, my doctor said I'm taking these medications, I'm not a diabetic anymore. That's actually a common thing. I've heard this at least 6 times here, that people come in and tell me they're not, but I've actually had them argue with me. I'm like, okay, what is a diabetic? A diabetic is when your blood sugars are too high, and your blood sugars are too high and you're taking 4 medications. So you have to make a lifestyle change. Balancing your diet is the first thing to do. Control your portion size. If you're going up in weight, if you're already overweight or you're going up in weight, you have to lower that portion size. And it takes strength, it takes willpower to do it, but lowering that proportion size. Especially when it comes to the carbohydrates. And the carbohydrates are your baked goods, your grains, things with sugar in them. You want to limit the sugary drinks and refined carbs. So, interesting enough, probably where a lot of people, especially young people now, are getting their major sugar from is from sodas. You look at, especially these kids drinking Red Bull, drinking things like that, Mountain Dews and things, are literally, if you took them and actually took the water off of them, it's about half sugar in that bottle is what it is. So you're drinking about half thing of sugar all at one time, and you just don't even realize it. Regular meal times. I said that having a regular meal time and having it spaced out in that 2 to 4 hour period basically gives you a chance to go into ketosis and burn up ketones to kind of clean out the mitochondria. So it'd be like I have a power plant that can do dual source. So I run coal through it for a while, but my stack is getting full of creosote and all that. So I'm going to let it come down. I'm going to run gas through it, which blows out that, and I clean it up, and now I come back and run it again. That's kind of what you do when you have regular meal times. You can do it. Fasting can do the same thing too. Fasting can help do that some. With diabetics in particular, they have to be careful about fasting too long right away. You can come in and fast for a while and then put it back in, but their blood sugars are so out of whack that you can't just go cut them off all the way. One other point to this too, balanced diet and regular meal times. Some individuals that are already in this mitochondrial dysfunction, they try to just cut down the calories they're eating. And they may cut down to 300 or 400 calories. And actually, if you do that if you do it for a short period of time in a fast, is one thing. But if you do that too long, that individual will put on an extensive amount of weight. Their body thinks that they're trying to hibernate, or that they're, especially females, that your job is still primitive in their mind. You need to go hide in the cave and protect the kids, and it thinks you're doing that. So now it says you're going to store every bit of water. In fact, you can go to bed at nighttime and inhale moisture, and you swell up at nighttime. You can literally weigh yourself, go to bed, get on the scale, weigh yourself again, and be heavier the next morning. So you also don't want to go into starvation when you're in these situations. Adequate fiber intake. So fiber slows glucose absorption because it feeds good healthy bacteria, and they eat a lot of the sugars and things. It also helps you speed up your transit time to get the stuff out of you. So Ozempic, trizepatide slows it down. The catch is with that, your gut flora don't want that. They want to basically clean out stuff and get new stuff to eat. When you take Ozempic, trizepatide, you're pretty much going to end up with a dysbiosis in the end. You're going to have gut problems somewhere along the way because stuff is taking too long to go through. And I didn't show it on Ozempic and semaglutide and that. You can get liver problems, gallbladder problems, and then also it messes up the thyroid gland, and so you end up with thyroid problems. So you go on it for a while, you're doing fine, you're losing weight, and all of a sudden you start gaining weight. It's usually going to be a thyroid issue. And then hydration. So whenever you're dehydrated, sugar concentrates. All those ROS species and everything in there concentrate. So you build up toxins and you can't get rid of it. Drinking more water helps clean that up. So reducing insulin resistance. Managing your weight is number one thing. People that are overweight tend to go towards insulin resistance very fast. People that are extremely thin don't get insulin resistance. So managing weight, if you're overweight, cleaning up the diet, cleaning up things, bringing that down helps reduce insulin resistance. Regular activity. And some people, especially after you've gotten to the diabetic state, activity becomes very hard. You can't feel your feet. You can't see as good. You start having issues. Whatever you can do. If it's sitting in your chair at home and tapping your feet, if it's getting up and out of the chair, if it's walking around the house, whatever it is, any activity, even twiddling your thumbs, is a calorie burner more than nothing. So activity is a big deal for insulin resistance. Healthy fat intake. So I mentioned about the mitochondria like to burn ketones. Ketones come from proteins and fats. When you put in good healthy fats, like animal fats, which the world would before, probably 2 years ago, would have said, oh my gosh, you can't eat an animal fat. It's actually much better for you. The seed oils and the trans fats actually cause insulin resistance. And so that's why we went in the 50s and 60s, you look at a beach picture, everybody was thin as a rail. We didn't have seed oils in. As you put seed oils in, people have gained weight because you can't break them down, you can't get rid of them. Well, it causes insulin resistance. So your seed oils and that are extremely bad for you. And I'll show you later, I did a presentation on that in the past, and I'll show you how to access that. Sufficient sleep. So insulin, when you go to sleep at nighttime, let me just tell you about a day in cortisol levels. So when you wake up in the morning time, cortisol levels are up here. And it says, get up out of your bed, get going. And so as you go through your day, cortisol levels drop, and it gets down here and it says, time to go to bed. And as you sleep, it goes back up again. You need that to let your mitochondria rest. They actually have to rest. So when cortisol levels are high, other systems don't work very good. When it hits bottom, you go into rest, digest, and heal. So you go rest, digest, and heal. As you rest, digest, and heal, all of a sudden cortisol levels come and say, hey, you're done. You rested, digest, and healed. Time to get up. So sleep is extremely important. And basically, if you get poor sleep, you have more insulin resistance. That's kind of like another one. I could draw another circle with arrows. Poor sleep causes insulin resistance, comes around, causes cortisol levels to be off, causes more hypoglycemia, and I could just do another one right around there. So where sleep and those go together. Stress management. So stress, when you get under stress, your body says, okay, we have to run away from the enemy, or we have to run away from the tiger. And so it increases your blood sugar so you can run a long ways. And our bodies are designed perfectly for that so we can get away from the tiger. The problem is we have people that are running from the tiger 24/7 now. You never get away from it. You're looking at Facebook and everybody's yelling about different stuff, or you're looking at the news and CNN and it's killing you or something, or you come home and instead of stop worrying about work, you open up your cell phone and you're looking at, oh, I got this email from the boss, I got this. And so we're not managing our stress very well anymore. And it makes our blood sugar go up and then causes resistance in there. So these are kind of a repeat, but it kind of shows you that circle again. They're the same cure. I'm basically spitting out the same cure for you. Mitochondria, the best way to help mitochondria is to get activity. And fact is, even if you have mitochondria that are dying in a cell, if you go out and get activity, a switch flips on and makes you make more mitochondria. So yeah, maybe you have ROS in there that's rusty, maybe it's not functioning good, you're tired, like I don't have any energy to do something. If you make yourself get up and do something, you will make more mitochondria, and therefore you'll have more energy, and you can burn up more of the sugar, and you can open back up those cells to the insulin. Healthy diet. helps mitochondria. So mitochondria like a good balanced, I would say, paleo diet. They don't like sugar. They like the ketones. So get them basically some ketones in there with good animal protein, with some good fats in there, and then throw in vegetables. The vegetables, the purpose of the vegetables in there is vegetables are antioxidants. They actually come in and clean out the ROS system. So you got a lot of people that are going on the carnivore diet, and they feel really good for a while because they're actually kind of cleaning that up, but they can't get the junk out of the cell. You have to have the vegetables to clean out the junk. You have other individuals that are saying, well, I don't eat meat or anything, and all they're doing is cleaning out the cell, and they feel really good for a while. Both of them are about a year and a half, 2 years, and then basically you tank out. So a vegetarian is going to tank out, no doubt about it, and a person who's a carnivore is going to tank out. You need meat and vegetables. You actually probably don't need any carbs. Your body will turn the fat into that carbs, but you got to have the vegetables and you got to have the meat. Limit your processed foods. Mitochondria, one of their other jobs that happens in their world is they kind of clean up toxins. They clean up heavy metals. They clean up pesticides. They clean up plastics. They clean up that kind of stuff. So the more of that kind of stuff you eat, they basically clogs up that mitochondria. So they basically take those things and rust them. So you have rusted piece of metal, rusted piece of plastic, and the mitochondria stops working because it gets choked up. So processed foods are rough on it. You want antioxidant-rich foods for them. Basically, this is your vegetables. This is your fruits. That kind of thing is really going to help it out. Adequate sleep. This goes back again. That mitochondria has to rest sometime. It has to have a break. It's producing a ton of energy. If I'm up going all day long, the mitochondria is producing. It needs to rest for a little bit to clean out the cycle, to clean out all the junk, and you need sleep to do it. Managing your blood sugars is a big one. If you're throwing a lot of glucose in it, it's producing a lot of rust. It can't get a break. And then we run some testing here, FMB test, which goes through your nutrients and what you need. But the mitochondria has a lot of cycles that go through it. If you've heard of the Krebs cycle, that happens inside the mitochondria. That's how you produce your ATP. It takes magnesium, it takes CoQ10, it takes a bunch of different B vitamins, but it likes them at the right ratio. So I have individuals that come in that are literally taking 4 or 5 B12 vitamins. It's a little bit in this one, a little bit in this one, a little bit in this one, and their B12 is so high that nothing else works. So usually we take a look at that and try to balance that out correctly. So how do you know if you have diabetes, insulin resistance, or mitochondrial dysfunction? You have to test. You have to test and verify. The first thing we do is a comprehensive metabolic test. And this is the chemistry test that I think probably every one of you have had when you go to the doctor. It basically has your glucose numbers on it, your calcium, all those kind of things. That test, when you're looking at glucose specifically, that test should be done with a 9 to 11 hour fast. If you're not getting a 9 to 11 hour fast, it's going to be off. So if you don't fast long enough, whatever you ate in your last meal is going to be influencing it. So usually it's going to be high. If you wait too long, if you get out to that 12 hours and beyond, basically you start breaking down fat and it's going to show high. So you can have an individual who's perfectly healthy and their blood sugars are perfectly healthy and they fasted for 17, 18 hours to come in to get their blood sugar done, and all of a sudden the doctor says, "Oh, man, you're a diabetic. We're going to have to get you on medication because you're a diabetic." And I'm thinking, really? I thought I was pretty healthy. They fasted so long that their blood sugar went up, and that was a protective mechanism there. A1C, this is a hemoglobin A1C. This is a type of hemoglobin in your body that is a byproduct of you processing sugars, is what it is. It's usually, there's debate on whether it is an average of what your blood sugar is over the last 28 days to 45 days. And it kind of matters on how well you produce this. But anyway, this is a long-term look at what your blood sugars have done. And so if you do an A1C, you're going to know, hey, your average blood sugar is running this, and that's a good one to do. I like it better than probably the comprehensive metabolic panel, but I get a lot of information for a cheap dollar out of both of those. The fasting insulin is important. Again, this is a 9 to 11 hour fast on the insulin. If you don't fast on it, your insulin is going to be high. If you wait too long and fast, well, you're putting sugar out from fat and it's going to be too high. So at 9 to 11 hours on fasting insulin. Where this comes really important, it tells me, first of all, are you making insulin? And also, is your insulin going down between times? when we look at fasting insulin and we look at your glucose, your fasting glucose, we can do a calculation. It's called a Thoma test. And the Thoma test is you take insulin times, fasting insulin times fasting glucose, and you divide by 405. And that gives you what your Thoma score is. Your Thoma score, the lower it is, the better off you are. The higher it goes, if you get above 4 on it, basically you start having a situation where you're insulin resistant. And so this is a good test to test for insulin resistance there. We run an FMV test here. It's not a cheap test. I want to say it's like $1,000. No, that's a lie and a half. I think it's like $700. It's other places like $2,000, but we basically charge what it is, so it's like $700. But it goes through and it measures your mitochondrial function. It measures your oxidative stress, how much is in there. Then it measures every one of your B vitamins. It measures all of your other antioxidants, and it also measures your heavy metals, and it also measures your fat contents. And it basically comes back and says, okay, you don't have enough B1 to do this inside the mitochondria, or you don't have enough antioxidants to do this, you need glutathione. So this test is really a good baseline. It's the best test I know to test mitochondrial function. So now we know, hey, what's going on with our blood sugar, what's going on with our insulin, we can tell what's going on there. We do some methylation tests. This is a genetic testing we do, and we usually use Ancestry DNA. It's a very cheap way to get your genetics. So you can go on to Ancestry DNA, and every holiday they sell it to you for $39. So right now it's $99. Next holiday, Mother's Day, it was $39. Next holiday it'll be $39. You do that. We take that for our patients. If you have that information, we take it and we basically come in and see what all your methylation genes are. Methylation genes are genes that basically tell you how you're going to use your energy inside the cell. And they take specific things like B12, methylfolate, B3, B1, SAMe, and they go into that cycle of cleaning out stuff. Well, if you happen to be a person who has, let's say, an MTHFR gene or a COMT gene, you can't clean out this stuff. If we give you higher doses of a certain vitamin, you can clean it out. So we can take people that have basically problems with their methylation, their mitochondria is not functioning right. We look at their FMV, we look at their genes and say, hey, they're low on B12. They actually need a higher dose of B12, and we give it to them and it cleans out that cycle. So now all of a sudden you feel 20, 30 years younger because you did two things on there for that. It makes a big difference. Cortisol levels, it's probably one of the easiest ways for us to look at stress levels. You know, it's funny because some people, they think they're real stressed out, but their cortisol levels are normal. Other individuals are like, oh, I handle stress good. Bring on the stress or bring on stress. And you're like, no, you're falling apart. You look at their cortisol levels like, no, you don't handle stress well. So you're usually not a very good predictor of your own stress. People are really good at hiding it. And then thyroid panel. So thyroid, I didn't mention a lot in insulin resistance, but the thyroid, if it is too high or too low, can cause insulin resistance. And the way that happens is, let's say your thyroid is high, or they're over-medicating you with thyroid. Your thyroid now is telling your body, make more energy, make more energy, make more energy. Well, the only way for your body to make more energy is to pull more glucose into the cell, because it has to make ATP. It can only make so much with ketones, so it's going to pull glucose in. Well, now, you know, if you put too much glucose inside the cell, you get insulin resistance. It shuts down the outside. If the thyroid is too low, basically, it tells your cell, you know what, you don't need any energy. Let's just shut down the outside of the cell and not bring anything in. That's insulin resistance. So you get insulin resistance if thyroid is too high, if thyroid is too low. So that's why we take a look at it. The other thing I don't have available in the office right now, but we are actually working on it, is continuous glucose monitors. Jennifer has, my wife out here, has one in her arm, and it's quite fascinating what you learn from them. Things that you think, well, that's no big deal, can cause a huge deal. Peanut butter is a great example of that. Peanut butter, if you go and eat peanut butter, there's more sugar in it than you think, and you get more carbs out of it, and it'll spike it. Another thing, things that you did earlier in the day can make a big change in the middle of the night. Some of them are slower to break down, so all of a sudden at 3 o'clock in the morning, you say, well, I'm waking up every night at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's because your blood sugar is spiking because of this time of night. And maybe it was corn. You had popcorn, And so you eat the popcorn, it has to go to your liver. The liver turns it into fat, and then several hours later, it turns it back into sugar, and your blood sugar spikes at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're wide awake because your body's like, hey, you got to burn this stuff off. So that continuous glucose monitor is a good way to say, am I doing what's right, or am I spiking my blood sugar? Hidden sources of carbohydrates. These are things that diabetics should be aware of, or people who don't want to become a diabetic. Juices. Even 100% fruit juice are extremely, extremely high sugar. So the sugar in fruit is usually in the juice. So when you take out all the good, healthy part of it and you just have the juice, you're basically saying, just give me the sugar, I don't want the rest of it. That's what you're doing with fruit juices. Sodas and sweetened drinks. So a lot of people, the next one's going to say it, coffees and teas. Oh no, I drink healthy, I have coffee and tea. Well then you see them pour in sugar into it, or they're buying one from the gas station and they think they're doing good. Some of them have high fructose corn syrup in it to make their sugar in it. Some of them have regular sugar poured into it. Alcohol. So alcohol, especially mixed drinks, will cause a problem. Your wines, your beers, these are common ones. I took out some slides out of here about alcohol in particular. To summarize it, alcohol, like your hard alcohol, doesn't have sugar in it. What it has is alcohol in it, or alcohol sugars. The catch is they work just like fructose. They go to your liver has to process it, it makes it into fat in the liver, and then it'll turn around and spike it again. So, talking about the continuous glucose monitor. You have a glass of wine at nighttime, your blood sugar actually drops. The way it works out is it actually makes your blood sugar drop. That's why people get munchies and stuff when they're out drinking and stuff and they have the stuff to eat, or why they walk out of the bar and they're not necessarily drunk and fall over. They actually have hypoglycemia and fall over and pass out because their blood sugar dropped. The problem is, 5 hours later in the middle of the night, when you're sleeping, all of a sudden your blood sugar now, it went into fat, comes back to sugar, and you wake up. So watch, if you have a glass of wine or have an alcoholic drink, you tend to wake up about 4 or 5 hours later, wide awake in bed, and think, wow, I don't know why I can't sleep. Because your blood sugar is telling you, get up and move around because we can't handle it anymore. Flavored milk, yogurts. I get people in here all the time, oh, I eat real healthy, yeah. I have a cup of yogurt every morning and everything, and I put granola on it, and I'm thinking, yeah, you just had candy for breakfast. So that's a big one there. Condiments. So I talked earlier about pizza, but pasta sauce is a huge one. It has lots of sugar in it. It's really sweet. And so not only does it have the sugars in it, then you're putting it over pasta and you're getting sugars out of that. Ketchup. Ketchup, for the most part, has very, very, very little tomatoes in it. It has mostly sugar in it, it has salt in it, and it has food coloring in it, is usually what's in your ketchup. In fact, if you've ever been to North Carolina in the summertime, you will see tractor trailer loads of green tomatoes going to the Heinz ketchup facility there. So they pick them green. They're not even red when they pick them. They take them, they boil them down, they grind them up, they add red food coloring to it, they add salt, and they add sugar to it, and that's what ketchup is. So ketchup is a candy putting on top of your hot dog and your hamburgers is what it is. Barbecue sauce usually has brown sugar in it. Salad dressings have a ton of sugar in it. The big catch is now in salad dressings is they're starting to put stevia in it, xanthium in it, things like that, because it's not real sugar. I'll get to that in a little bit. And then your pasta sauce again. So, other things that have sugar in it that cause problems. Things that say sugar-free or diet products are very interesting. So, yeah, they didn't add any sugar to it, but what they have is they have carbohydrates to it, or they add what's called sugar alcohols. So these are sugar groups that have alcohol to it. The U.S. government doesn't count it as a sugar. It goes to your liver, it pulls the alcohol group off, and now you have the sugar to go out to everywhere in your body. So it's an interesting one, and it actually impacts you extensively. So sugar-free diet stuff is not necessarily the way to go. You want real food. Protein bars, granola bars have a lot of carbohydrates in them, a lot of sugar in it. So it may say zero sugar on it, but the carbohydrates in them, you eat them, and basically your calories go up. So when you look at the calories on it, it's an issue in there. Canned fruits. A lot of them have sugar added to them, but also a lot of them are concentrated in fruit juice and fruit syrup. So not only did they take the 100% fruit juice, but they boiled it down until now it's thick like syrup. So you're basically getting candied. When you're getting a lot of things in cans, you're getting candied fruit. And you know it. Because if you go eat, a peach, or you go get one out of a can, which one is sweeter? The one out of a can is in sugar, for sure. And they may not have added it to it, but it's there. Instant oatmeal and cereals. So a lot of them have added sugar, but that's actually not the problem. Remember I mentioned carbohydrates, and they break down into sugars. So you go get your Cheerios, and there's no sugar added. Great. You put it in your mouth, it goes down to your gut, amylase comes in, and now it turned it 100% sugar. There's nothing else there. It is 100% sugar. So when you see that Cheerios or something like that, you go to eat it, it is sugar. I mean, there's no doubt about it. That's what it's going to become. It's not great for you. And then packed snacks, crackers, chips, especially all those that are basically made from flour, you're going to get a lot of calories out. And I have an example of this in a little bit. Dairy, your milk, your yogurts, they contain lactose, which is going to actually convert to glucose. And so they have sugars in it, but also a lot of your yogurts have sugar added to it. They have carbohydrates added to it to basically speed up the fermenting process. But they basically say, well, surely the yeast took care of it all. But you can taste it. You taste the sweetness in it. You know it didn't get fermented all the way to all the sugar being out. Otherwise, it would be real bitter. So if you actually make your own yogurt, you can taste it. It tastes kind of soury like that. It's because you used up all the sugar out of it. They stopped the fermentation process in it to make it stay sweet, is what they did. Fruits and certain vegetables. So, starchy vegetables and grains. These are where probably 99% of your diabetics actually have the problem. So your potatoes, if you wish to gain weight, eat potatoes. Eat white potatoes in particular. Sweet potatoes don't have the same thing. There's a lot of fiber in sweet potatoes. But if you want to gain weight, when I make diet plans for my athletes, I put them on white potatoes. Eat as much white potatoes as you can because it's the fastest, easiest way to gain weight along with white rice. Corn. Corn nowadays is mostly a little husk on the outside or a shell on the outside and high fructose corn syrup on the inside. That's what it is. So corn is really candy, is what it is. So if you're going to go eat corn, you might as well go eat candy corn. You probably actually process the candy corn just about as easy. And then peas are the same way. Peas have the same process as corn do. They're higher in carbohydrates and non-starchy vegetables. So they don't have the fiber in them, the ones that I just mentioned. You don't have fiber out of them. Dried fruits. So most of you would never go buy a clump of grapes and sit down and eat the whole clump of grapes. But you'd have no problem going and taking a handful of raisins and eating them. Those raisins are basically the full clump of grapes with all the water pulled out of it. So if you think about all the sugar that's in a clump of grapes and you go to eat it, you basically just ate the same thing with dried fruit. So, or you wouldn't sit down and eat, let's say, you wouldn't sit down and eat 2 apricots or 3 apricots, you'd eat one. But when you go to eat dried fruit, you'll eat a whole bunch. You may eat 4 or 5 apricots or whatever the same way. So you got to be careful with dried fruit. If you're a diabetic, it'll really flare the sugars in. The grains. So you got to choose wisely on grains. Your refined grains. So when we're talking about refined grains, let me tell you about non-refined grains. So your cut steel oats are not refined. Your whole wheat breads are not refined as much anyway. Your brown rice it's not refined and bleached and all that like white rice is. And your pastas, your whole grain pastas and things aren't refined. When you start throwing in white bread, you start throwing in white rice, you start throwing in pasta, all those processed grains are basically you're throwing straight sugar in. You can almost measure it out, ounce for ounce, gram for gram, sugar to those things. And so it's fine to eat those things once in a while, but if you're a diabetic, you got to get rid of them. I mean, absolutely get rid of them until you get everything back to neutral. So you're not insulin resistant anymore, your blood sugars are down, and your mitochondria functions. Then you have it once in a while. But it shouldn't be a staple in your diet. Gluten-free. I have people come in here that are 300 plus pounds, and they'll say, oh, I'm gluten-free. And so I eat healthy. You have more sugar and more calories and gluten-free. So when gluten-free first came out, and they would have a piece of bread, it would be a small piece of bread, or the cupcake would be really small, and people would be like, well, I want my regular sized bread, well, that same small cupcake, that same small piece of bread, has as much sugar and as much calories as a full size. Now you go to Walmart and you get gluten-free bread, you can get it in regular size, but you start looking at the sugar and the calories in it, and you're getting 2 or 3 times what you are in a regular piece of bread. So just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthy for you. It means, yeah, you got an alternative, but it's not necessarily healthy. Soups. Soups are really big about hiding sugar and things in it, especially when you get to more of your pasta type soups and things like that. They're really laden with high carbs, which means sugar. When you hear carbs, think sugar. That's what it means. On labels, things will be as carbs, and then sometimes they'll have fiber on it. There are 2 different things. Fiber is healthy, carbs are bad when you look at it that way. Healthy foods. Foods they say, oh, this is healthy for you. We go back to the granola bars and that. But smoothies. If you go somewhere and you get a smoothie and think, oh, I'm getting a fruit smoothie, they're usually putting sugar on the fruit, either that before they do it, after they do it, because they want you to come back and buy more. They want to make it super sweet. So most of your smoothies have either dairy in them that has sugar in it, or they have sugar added to it. Nut butters. Almost all your nut butters have added sugar to them. I will also go back to say this too, that a lot of your nuts you go buy packages, if you notice, they're coated in sugar. They put honey on them and they dip in sugar and stuff. So you got to watch. Nuts are nuts, not candy. If you're going to get candy, that's what you're getting when you get sugar on them.
Dry roasted has lots of seed oil.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be careful with the seed oil and stuff. It's tough, and it's hard to find raw too that are not cooked. So warning. This is an example that I've used for years. I actually went and looked it up and verified everything the other night, and it's actually worse than I used to tell people. So baked goods have more sugar and turn into sugar when it's digested. So the average piece of white bread has 13 to 17 grams of glucose after it's digested. A cube of sugar actually is sucrose. It's 4 grams per cube of sugar, but every sugar when you put it in your mouth is actually 2 grams of glucose in it. So if you have 1 piece of white bread, it's equal to 6.5 to 8.5 cubes of sugar. You'd never go and take 8.5 cubes of sugar and go, okay, put it in your mouth. Or think about that. If you start making a sandwich, let's say you'd never take 16 cubes of sugar, put it on a piece of ham, roll it up and eat it that way. But it gets worse than that. Let's say I take and make a ham sandwich and cheese sandwich on white bread, and I put some ketchup on it. It's going to be 16 plus cubes of sugar, and that was at the minimum. So when I took the minimum of 6.5 and I put it out, it's equal to 16 minimum. This can be up to 32 cubes of sugar in what you have in that sandwich right there. So it's kind of interesting to see how much sugar is really in that kind of stuff. The next thing I have, this is kind of, when I did my master's in nutrition, we did some work with a DEXA scan, which I think probably a lot of you ladies have went and had a DEXA scan. It measures what your bone density is, but you can change the settings on a DEXA scan to see how much fat you have on board, how much fluid you have on board. And so some of the studies I did was we had people eat different diets and stuff and see how much fluid it put on them or how much fat it put on them, and we did some other indices, and all of a sudden really quickly found out what foods raise your blood sugar, what foods make you fat, what foods make you retain fluid. And all those kind of led to that same thing, insulin resistance, hypoglycemia, mitochondrial dysfunction. So I came up with what do we need to have to keep us alive and to keep us healthy in general. So this particular meal plan is made for individuals who don't necessarily want to take a real strict diet and take out all carbs, but need some carbs in their diet. This one is a good, solid, balanced diet that gets rid of the inflammation. So proteins, eggs, chicken, turkey, fish, lean beef, pork in moderation. The reason you don't want pork every day, pork tends to make you a little acidic. Some people get gout from it, but also pork will tend to make you retain fluid. Tree nuts, no peanuts. Peanuts are not nuts, they're actually beans. And they actually have a lot of inflammatory things in a peanut. So usually, typically, most of your people that you see eat peanuts constantly tend to inflame. and they've made it worse. When they started modifying peanuts, they used an E. coli bacteria to modify it, so you can use a chemical on it called Prost. Prost is like Roundup, but specific for peanuts and for clovers and stuff like that. And so they made it so they could do that. Now you tend to swell up and inflame when you put peanuts in your diet. Peanuts are great for wrestlers who need to go up to the next weight class. You give them peanuts and they swell up and they'll go up. So if you want to swell up and gain weight, throw in peanuts, especially peanut butter. Complex carbs. So these particular 5 complex carbs in here tend to take a long time to break down in your body. So even though there's sugar in them, the bacteria have to actually come in, break it down. The bacteria eats about half or 3/4 of the sugar, and they also give you fiber to help you get rid of bad cholesterol and stuff out of you. So this one's here, oatmeal, especially steel cut, non-instant oatmeal. So you want non-instant. So even if you have a rolled oat, you don't want it to be an instant oatmeal. Brown rice, quinoa, sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes have a ton of fiber in it. Sweet potatoes tend to ferment in the gut, and they feed really healthy bacteria that help you lose weight. So sweet potatoes are healthy for you. And then beans, particularly not soybeans. Soybeans aren't necessarily healthy for you and cause some other issues, but your green beans, your black eyed peas, those kind of things work well for you. Vegetables. Any vegetable except for white potatoes. If you're trying to gain weight, if you're an athlete or you're an elderly person who's losing weight, can't put it on, throw in the potatoes. Otherwise, you leave out the white potatoes. Corn is a grain, not a vegetable. So I get people come in and 300, 400 pounds, and they say, I'm a vegetarian. I look at them and I think, I don't think it is possible. It's not even possible you're a vegetarian. So what do you eat? Well, I eat corn on the cob, creamed corn, corn salad, corn chips, and that. And I say, oh, well, you're not a vegetarian. Yeah, I am. No, you're a grainitarian. You're not a vegetarian. So there's a difference between grains and vegetables. So corn is a grain, not a vegetable, and I have to put that because if I didn't, every person says, well, what about corn? Corn is a grain. Any fruit, berries are a plus. I have played around, I put it on, I took it off, played it on, put it on, that except for your melons. Your melons tend to be real high in there. And the catch is melons don't tend to make you swell. They tend to hydrate you. And so there's a trade-off there with proper hydration and sugar. So probably on the diabetic one, I probably should have took them off. But in general, on a healthy plan, in moderation. Down here, I put in avoid the big 6. These big 6 things tend to be things that every person, when they ate them, swelled up. They got swelling inside, blood sugar went up, they had issues. So when we took out these big 6, we put people on a real quick, healthy path. So, and I didn't put this first because if I put this first, people would stop listening to me right off the bat. So I dropped it in the middle and just bolded it. So avoid the big 6. Wheat, corn, soy, dairy, sugar, and peanuts. And if you look at your diet now, that probably makes up your food groups in your diets, truthfully, if you look at it. So then, as soon as I say that, the next question everybody says is, well, what am I going to eat? I say, great. That's what I just told you. You're going to pick something out of the protein line, which you can do. It's basically a meat. You're going to pick something out of the carbohydrate line. You got vegetables to pick from, and you got fruit to pick from. Well, I don't know. I can't stand the taste of it. Okay, you can use any spices and herbs you want as long as they don't have dairy or sugar in them. So a lot of the McCormick spices, things like that, you can throw in them. Cinnamon you can throw on there. You can throw on paprika, anything you want. So what's it look like? Breakfast, 6 ounces of protein. This is kind of average. When you come in, I change it up for people. Sometimes I raise up protein, lower it down. Sometimes I take down the carbs. It depends. I change it up some for different people. Some people, this is really a good baseline though. 6 ounces of protein, so you could go eat 3 eggs, or you could eat 2 eggs. You could have a piece of bacon or 2 in there. That's perfect. A half a cup of carbs. You could have sweet potato hash browns. You could have some brown rice, or you could have oatmeal. Throw in some almond milk, unsweetened almond milk in it, and you can have oatmeal in there. And now you have a half a cup of fruit. So, me personally, I do 3 eggs, oatmeal with almond milk in it, and I would throw in blueberries in it. Or I chop up an apple and throw cinnamon in there, and that's the breakfast. And I can make that breakfast in about 5-6 minutes is what I can make that breakfast in. Mid-morning, you throw in a handful of nuts. So it's anywhere, depending on who I'm writing this for, it's anywhere between 10 and 20 nuts, which is usually what fits in the palm of your hand, almost closed. And when you throw this in right here during this time period, it actually creates a ketogenic state. You actually gave your mitochondria sugar first thing in the morning because you're low on sugar because you were sleeping. And you get up, you throw in some sugar with the fruit in that and the carbohydrates. And those carbohydrates take a long time to break down. So it's going to be smoldering. You throw in those nuts, it's fat and protein. So what you just did is you actually turned back on your stomach a little bit. You put in that fat and protein, so you just turned your mitochondria into burning ketones. So you went burn sugar, turn on to burn ketones, and now you back it back out again. You come into lunchtime, 6 ounces of protein. So this can be a chili if you want to make a chili. So you could have meat in your chili. You could throw in the beans in there. You could throw in some veggies in there, and you could have chili. This could be a soup. This could be a salad with protein on it, anything like that. Then, mid-afternoon, you throw in a half a cup of fruit. And we do this on purpose. We loaded it up, put those ketones in there, and then we come back. Now, mid-afternoon, you're getting sleepy, you're getting tired. And basically, if we throw in that carbohydrates, we can get you through the end of the day that way. So we come back in, evening time. Now you could have a ribeye steak with a sweet potato and asparagus or vegetables or whatever you want to, and that's evening time. I will tell you this. I don't know anybody who ever needs this bottom line. I put in that bottom line because people literally tell me this is not enough food for me to eat. You're going to have a hard time eating this amount of food. So these are basically nutrient-dense foods. When you put them in your body, it takes a lot of energy for your body to eat them and everything, and so you don't get hungry on this diet. In fact, most people will come in and say, "Oh, I'm going to be hungry, I'm going to be starving." If they follow this diet to the T, I have yet to have a person that had to throw in that late meal in there. It just doesn't happen. If you have to, throw in some protein and some veggies, and you'll be full. So that's it, yeah.
So for breakfast, oatmeal, steel cut oats with blueberries, that's not enough. Need to have that.
You got to have the protein. So the purpose of this diet is actually we jumpstart the system right here. Then we turn it into ketogenesis. We kind of keep keto going here because most of these vegetables in this aren't going to be a quick sugar. They're going to be later on in the day. So then we have to kind of throw in a quick sugar here. Otherwise you have a low. And then we throw back in a regular meal to get you through the night. So it's actually set up intentionally. It's called a thermodynamic burn. This is set up to burn off calories and to make it so that you have enough energy is what it is. I wrote this for my master's, and a number of professors have taken it and published it because like, can we do it? And I was like, yeah. I wasn't smart enough at the time to know this was something. And so now there's a lot of diets out there, paleo diets, that almost use the same setup as I do here. So it works well. But it's called thermodynamics. And thermodynamics of food basically means that you're burning calories when processing that food. So a great example of this, if you go to drink your food, your brain thinks it's water. So you don't have to chew it. You don't produce saliva. If I chew food and I produce saliva, it takes like 10 to 20 calories overall in the overall scheme of the day. If I drink it, none of that happens. When I get food down in my stomach, if I have real food, it has to churn and break it up. I have to produce hydrochloric acid. I basically have to work to get it broken down. That's a lot of calories. If I drink food, your body thinks it's water. It doesn't churn it. It doesn't do anything there. So I don't have any thermodynamics of food. When you put in real food, it also creates heat because it likes to break it down faster. So not only is it churning it, it makes a lot of calories into heat. And that's why you get cold. When you eat food, you may be sitting there and you're like, wow, I just got cold. It's because basically you turn on the thermogenesis inside. You took it from everywhere else to do it. And you burn up a lot of calories. So this is a thermodynamic diet. Burns a lot of calories, regulates blood sugar throughout the day. So if you took out the protein, let's say you ate the carbs and the fruit, what's going to happen is when you get to that mid-morning, you're going to want more carbs because basically you turn that mitochondria and everything out of ketosis into sugar, and you're going to start craving sugar because the insulin process and all that went on. And that's what usually happens to people.
Is Greek yogurt without sugar a no-no?
Yeah, because Greek yogurt is going to fall into that dairy range. So, and the sugar range. So yeah. If you want to gain weight, eat Greek yogurt for breakfast. You know, it's just not the best way to do it. our diets are messed up. We have been trained here in the U.S. mainly by marketing to do everything the opposite of what you should be doing. I mean, everything we do is the opposite of what you should be doing. The truth is, if you ate off your own farm, you probably wouldn't have a problem, because most people wouldn't overdrink milk. They wouldn't do stuff like that if you were making it over your own farm, because by the time you make yogurt, by the time you make butter, you don't overdo it, you know. This is where I think in your books we get to that page, the thing that I wrote. So I had individuals, my predecessor to a clinic that I owned was selling pounds and pounds and pounds of stevia. And I came into him and I said, hey, I think the stevia is going to cause havoc and problems. And he's like, no, stevia doesn't hurt you. It's inert, doesn't make a bit of difference. I said, can't be. It's impossible. I have a master's in nutrition. It can't be inert. So I wrote this paper basically explaining why it's a problem. And to say it real quickly, when you put something sweet on your tongue, it doesn't matter whether it's stevia, it doesn't matter whether it's glucose, it doesn't matter what it is, your body thinks that you have sugar coming in. So your brain sends a signal to your pancreas, says, release the insulin, sugar's on its way. And the sweeter it is, the more insulin you release. Stevia is like 10 times sweeter than regular sugar. And so when it touches your tongue, your brain says, oh, we got the mother load coming. And you produce a ton of insulin. That insulin goes along and it takes every bit of sugar that's floating in your body, goes and shoves it into fat, shoves it into the muscles, shoves it everywhere it's supposed to go. And now it's waiting for the sugar to come down. No sugar comes down. It doesn't happen because you had stevia. It's not real sugar. So now you have one or two things that's going to happen in the next instance. Either you're going to start craving sugar because your blood sugar just dropped, it plummeted, and you're going to go eat the carbs. You're going to eat the carbs out of the counter. You're going to have the cookies, the snack cakes, and everything, and that's what most people do. So most of your people that try to do real good don't. But let's say you're really good and you're on this really strict diet and you just ate the stevia, so it's healthy and everything. You're saying, oh God, I'm starving. Nope, not going to let's do it. I'm not going to eat anything. So now your blood sugar is plummeted out. You do this for about a month, maybe even 3 weeks, and next time you put something sweet on your tongue, your body says, you have fooled me so long, I'm not going to produce any more insulin. So now you get the sugar down in your gut because you've decided you really eat some sugar this time. It goes down your gut, no insulin's produced. So now what happens is your blood sugar goes up, and it's because your pancreas is downregulated and is not producing enough insulin. So there is no substitute that you can put in for sugars that's going to be healthy for you. You cannot do it. It's not possible. You actually have to cut down on the carbs. You have to cut down on the sugars. At 28 days, all of your taste buds change out. If you can clean up your diet for 28 days, I will tell you this. If you go and eat a carrot, you go eat a blueberry, it'll be the sweetest carrot and blueberry you've ever had in your life at 28 days. Here's a problem. It upregulates really fast, within days. So if you go now and go to that party and you go to bite into the cupcake, it'll taste really sweet. You're like, whoa, I almost can't eat it. Maybe you won't finish eating it. But the next few days, you'll upregulate those taste buds again. And now the carrot doesn't taste as sweet anymore. The blueberry doesn't taste sweet anymore. Your vegetables don't taste sweet anymore. So it takes longer in one direction than it does the other. And it's made as a primitive setting to make it so that you will actually take and eat sugar, because sugar wasn't a regular commodity. You know, when we talked about the Inuits, we talked about other people. Sugar wasn't something you ate. I want to show you this. The last several times, people ask me, well, hey, where can we look at your old videos and your old seminars and everything? This is my website, the Legacy Clinic. If you go on it and you hit the video library, you can get to it there. And sorry, I didn't have it in your book. It's not in your book, because I just did this literally right before you walked in the door. And if you go to the video library, you hit that button, it takes you to this screen. And right here, the previous seminars, the cholesterol, the cardiovascular, thyroid, all those are there for you to find. And then probably in a couple weeks, this one will be up there too. So, but there's some good information there.
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Yeah, you can go to YouTube and look up Dr. Christopher Thoma and get it. Otherwise, you can go to the Legacy Clinic and you hit the video library and it takes you right to it too. But that's been a question. We have people call in all the time asking, so I thought I'd show that to you. And if you guys need my services, basically, I'll treat you good. You come in, I try to figure out the underlying problems, and try to figure out how to help you out, and usually do well with it.